For all of the fights in this video, I am running the no Apex build. The only talent changes are in the class tree depending on the dungeon, and I will mention it if it's relevant for the encounter. For Magister's Terrace, make sure that you have Diffuse Magic talented. For the hallway trash, you should have the buff from the worms for the first pack. This is a damage and a healing increase. The main things I'm looking for in this area are the glaive targets and the dispels. If you are the first target of the glaive, you can shadow meld and it will not recast, which will save you a full set of glaives. And realistically, you can get one at the beginning of the hallway and one at the end, with the end pack being much harder due to the composition of the pack. If the glaive isn't on you, you can precast a life cocoon or an enveloping on the main target first, and then the secondary target when you can see who it is, but a majority of the healing still comes from Way of the Crane and Shaylin's Gift's instant cast through Vivacious Vivification. You should also have high renewing mist uptime for Mistline and Lotus Infusion value. You should be dispelling the Holy Fire mobs as quickly as you can, and if you're sitting on a debuff but expecting another one to come soon, I let the old one sit and heal through it, unless they end up also being a glaive target. If the Holy Fire is on you, you can use Fortifying Brew to dispel yourself. It will also deal damage, though it will not be attributed to you. And then just heal yourself through Way of the Crane, Jadefire Teachings, and Shaylin's Gift. We have a lot of passive talents that make healing ourselves much easier than healing other people. You do run the risk of someone getting hit by a glaive and getting jumped on by the Spellsworn Familiar, we like to call them blueberries. You can try to stun them before they jump if there's a lot of glaives out, but ideally if you have multiple range they will spread out a bit so they don't get cleaved, just to help minimize the damage taken. At the end of this hallway there is a chance that the two Spellbreakers are going to be the last two things alive. That is usually where I try to use my second Shadow Meld if I get it back from using it from the first time. That doesn't always happen, but I do also try to save some cooldowns like Life Cocoon, Revival, or Celestial Conduit, because that is going to be healing with low target count, and I want to make sure that I can heal us before we go into the boss. You should also be using Life Cocoon on your Squishies players as much as you can. You should get it quite a few times in this hallway due to the cooldown reduction through Heart of the Jade Serpent. We don't do this route anymore, but since this is a 3-pack, your Way of the Crane won't be very effective here, outside of procs, so you will be sending additional cooldowns on lower mob counts as well as casting a lot more for spot healing. Here I get targeted by the glaive and I Shadow Meld it off because I don't want to heal on 3 targets because that kind of sucks. I dispel the mage immediately, and we have another runic glaive going out in which I will pop Chi-Chi, I will put Enveloping Mist on the glaive targets, and I will continue to do my DPS rotation. And then here we have 4 sets of glaives out, so I just go ahead and revival because I only have 1 target at this point, with that revival being my only cooldown. So then I'm just going to spot heal until this final Spellbreaker is dead, and then we'll go into boss. This is a hard hallway, but a lot of it is just coming down to making sure that you are properly prioritizing your dispels and making sure that you are carefully watching the glaive targets, and making a conscious effort of saving your throughput cooldowns for the end of packs or for smaller packs when you cannot rely on your damage conversion as much. For Seat of the Triumvirate, you are going to drop Vital Clarity and take Swift Art, which is directly to the left of that talent. That will make the subjugators much easier in the first area. So this first area has a lot happening in it. The main thing that you're looking out for are the subjugator chains and the heal absorb. The chains of subjugation will not apply to you if you have a freedom effect rolling like Chi-Chi or Hand of Freedom. If you have an anti-root or an anti-snare like Tiger's Lust, you have to use it after the chains apply. When you're using Swift Art in here, you can free yourself every other set. So what I would recommend doing, because you can't track Swift Art's cooldown in the cooldown manager, I would use Tiger's Lust on another player on the same set that you're using Swift Art, so that you at least are within a couple seconds of knowing if your roll cooldown is up or not. And then when you have Chi-Chi rolling, you are not going to even have it applied to you. So usually what will happen is that you'll Chi-Chi the first set, and then the next set you can Swift Art and then Tiger's Lust someone else, and then you will have nothing for the next, but you can Shadow Meld it off if you're a Night Elf, and then you will have Tiger's Lust and Swift Art for the chains after that one. Depending on your route in here, and depending on if you're running Jade Bond, you may have more immunity based on your shorter cooldown, or you may immune to back-to-back if you're pulling 2 subjugators and you have Jade Bond on, so it really depends, but being aware of Swift Art and Tiger's Lust cooldowns will help you a lot in here. Most of our healing is going to be coming from Way of the Crane, but I would still recommend putting out your Renewing Mist, at least on the Gather, so that you have that Lotus Infusion value as well as Mistline. Lotus Infusion and Mistline are going to help you through the Chains of Subjugation for the players that cannot free themselves, but it is also going to help the Leeching Void target, which is the Heal Absorb. If you have enough targets, you can continue to spin, especially if you have a Dance of Chi-Chi proc. Otherwise, if you're down to a couple of targets, you can use Life Cocoon or you can just single target heal them. I think Mistweaver handles this area quite well just because of all of the snare and slow drops that we have, both for ourselves and for others, so we really need to leverage those things to just prevent the damage from happening in the first place, as opposed to just healing it off. When you have less people taking that damage, you have less people missing health, which means that your healing is going to split more evenly and make healing just way easier in general. If you find that you have a free global, you can help reduce some of the tank damage by soothing the champions. They do have an enrage effect. You also have things like Leg Sweep and your Ring of Peace to help prevent the Umbral Bolts from going off, though because there's very few casters on this pack, the DPS and the tank should be able to handle the kicks. One more note about Swift Art is if you don't want to actually travel anywhere with your roll, as in you want to stay within the pack so you can continue to spin, if you jump and then roll, you're not going to move anywhere, but the roll will still go off, so you can get your dispel that way. I've got like 5 or 6 targets here, and I'm still not really making a dent in that heal absorb, even with my Renewing Mist on him and a Shalen's Gift cast, so at a certain point, the heal absorb is definitely something that you are going to have to focus instead of just healing off passively through Lay of the Crane. I do end up sending Life Cocoon there, but if you don't have it in the future, I would have just stopped to channel Soothing Mist, Enveloping Mist, and then use Shalen's to top him. The third boss of Seat is probably one of the harder bosses for Mistweaver specifically this season, just because you are spread out all over the place. The odds of you being able to hit a mob are not 100% because you're going to be running between tentacles, or maybe you have a bad gate spawn or something. In addition to this also being really heavy 3-target damage, as well as heavy group-wide damage during the intermission, our profile doesn't fit this great, so we are casting a lot, and a lot of our spot healing is going to feel pretty weak. Typically what I will do is I will try to hold my cooldowns for the intermission phase because that is when most of the group-wide damage is happening, and then try to spot heal my group through the tentacle damage that we're taking. I would recommend dropping a Transcendence in the middle of the room so you can quickly get back to the boss after he does the knockback. None of our cooldowns are strong enough to heal through the Collapsing Void by themselves, so we do have to pair it with things like Black Ox procs, using your Thunder Focus Tea with Rising Sun Kick, and then spot healing with your Shalen's Gift, and then you have a couple of seconds to top people up with damage conversion or other spot heals before the tentacle spawns. One way to help with the damage split for the 3 players in the main phase is this Mass Void Infusion. You can use Shadow Meld and get rid of one of them, and then you're only healing 2 targets, which makes it a lot easier because of our damage split, and it's just one less person that you have to worry about. You can also use Mage Invis and maybe Hunter's Feign Death, though I'm not sure about that one. If you know, let me know in the comments, but it sounds like it should work. The tentacles will always spawn in 3 different groups. There will be 2 individual and then 1 group of 3. I usually try to save my Touch of Death for one of the individual ones since they are not going to be dying as quickly because the DPS tend to focus on the 3, which is correct, but just helps a little bit with the phasing into the intermission. On this pull, I used my Chi-Ji on the same set that I used my Shadow Meld, so I would avoid doing that in the future. So for this Collapsing Void to cast, I had to use Revival and then just relying entirely on spot healing and triage through Soothing Mist, Enveloping, and Shalen's. Unfortunately, this is one of these bosses that if people are not using their defensives or they're not killing the tentacles quickly enough, it does fall onto the healer, but you can only deal with the tentacle in the intermission for a couple of seconds maybe. that really should be dead before you're going into the intermission, or you need to have someone have a really heavy defensive if they are the target. Chi on this fight is kind of weird. I'm mostly just using it to spread Enveloping Mist before the intermission, or before the damage wherever I'm using it. The Gust of Mist healing from it, especially with Gift of the Celestials, is really weak, so I'm just trying to get the damage amp and the Chi Cocoons out, and then just healing through spot healing, or other cooldowns like Litany or Life Cocoon. It's not too common in keys where we go directly from one boss to a next boss, but in this case there's about 45 seconds of roleplay in between this one and Jalura, so you don't have to worry too much about what cooldowns you're sending beforehand, unless you're running Jade Bond or you want Revival in the early phase. Most of the damage from Lyra is coming from the beginning of the notes phase. The more notes that are active, the more damage that you'll be taking, so I tend to front load this fight with my cooldowns, and the shorter cooldowns should be coming back after your first burn phase. Chi, Life Cocoon, and Conduit are the first ones I try to use, with Life Cocoon being held primarily for players like the squishy players with Discordant Beam. So the most dangerous part of this fight is the first set of beams where you have all of the nodes active and a large burst of damage coming for the 3 players with the beam. Here I use Life Cocoon on our Evoker. You should always be playing Dance of the Wind in any dungeon, but especially in here, do not use a defensive if you are targeted with Discordant Beam. Your Dance of the Wind will fully DR the beam since it is sonic damage, which is physical. Instead, you can use your defensive on the early rot phase, and you can use Life Cocoon on other players. This footage was taken before 12.0.5, so that's why I am having to run and stop and then cast Soothing Mist, but now that spinning phase is a lot easier because you can cast Soothing Mist while moving. But a lot of this fight is really just sending your cooldowns early in the phase and then trying to get through to the burn, and then you can wait for all your cooldowns to come back. If you are using the Litany trinket and you are able to hold it so that you have it up for the intermission, I would do that. So you can send it super early into the fight and then have it back for the very end of the burn. The reason I mention this is because you get a very large damage amp here, and the way Litany works is that it gives a shield based on the damage that you do, so any boss that has an amp will provide bigger shields if that's when you're using it. This will help DR the backlash in addition to some of the initial damage from the first set of notes. Here we're just going to ride the shields from the burn phase a little bit. I do have my Life Cocoon available as well as Chi, which I will use next, and then Conduit after that. Here is just the end of Chi. I do tend to use it for the movement phase, especially pre 12.0.5 just because of the movement requirement. And then I use Conduit for actual burst healing to top people from the rot that they're taking into the beams. Here I do use my Life Cocoon a little bit early just to help with the spot healing. Because I don't have Revival, I am a little bit less prepared for the AoE group damage. This is just essentially putting a pause on his health bar so I don't have to worry about it and my healing will split better. And then here I use my litany again just to deal with the backlash damage into the small amount of health that we still have to do after the intermission. For Skyreach, you are dropping Diffuse Magic and Vital Clarity, and you are taking Chi Transfer to get to Link Spirits. Chi Transfer isn't super useful in here, it is mainly just pathing for Link Spirits. Ericnath is a boss that has a lot of 3-target priority healing needed into an AoE smash. The AoE smash isn't really an issue for us as long as everyone's topped, they will live, and then you have time to top people up passively until the next set of beams come out. This is a fight where you, as a Mistweaver, should always try to take a beam. We have a lot more self-healing than we have healing for others, so it is a lot easier to take care of ourselves and 2 other people versus 3 other people. There's a decent amount of spot healing on this fight. I do try to watch and see who is taking the beams. If they have a defensive rolling, then it's going to be a lot easier to heal them. If they don't have one, then I usually send a smaller cooldown like Chi, a high stack Shaylun's, or Life Cocoon. You get a Supernova, which is the big AoE every second set of beams, so usually I will try to hold my Conduit and my Litany or my Revival for this, just to make sure that people are topped before the big hit. If it's Conduit or Litany, you can use them slightly before the damage from the beam stops, just to keep people a little bit healthier, but if it's Revival, then you should wait until the beams stop before you use it. If no one has defensives and you don't have any cooldowns, then it's likely that something got mismanaged somewhere, or people just aren't using their defensives, which is something that happens and it's not anything you can do about it. But if you are in that situation, then you can just use Soothing Mist, Enveloping Mist spread on the injured targets, and Shaylun's Gift as needed. Ideally too, your tank should be stepping into a beam. The boss will do 2 frontals, and then he will have a little bit of spare time where he could step into someone's beam and take it off of them. Usually it's another melee because we'll be closest to the boss, but it doesn't always have to be. If the range stand close enough, they can have it taken off of them as well. Right here I did mismanage a bit. I sent my Litany and my Conduit together earlier, so I am left with no cooldowns here, so I am just kind of triaging with Shaylun's Gift and Enveloping Mist. This is where your Link Spirits comes in. I usually will place it on a ranged player, so in this case I have it on our Evoker. But as soon as you get picked up by your bird, you can then just immediately transfer out. And that will not only help boss damage, but it will help you with your healing because you are not ever going to be out at range of anyone, and you are going to be able to maintain uptime for melee, for healing, like with Rising Sun Kick and Rising Mist. Very similar to the second boss in here that we just went over, it is 3-target heavy intake with a small break here and there. Usually it's about 2 sets of beams before there's a break, but again, cycling cooldowns properly, using Life Cocoon liberally, taking advantage of any of the Black Ox procs that you get, as well as just regular triage through Soothing Mist, Enveloping, and Shaylun's Gift. The cadence on this fight is a little different than the second boss because you get 3 sets of beams before you get your break during the Lens Flare, but that just gives you a little bit of time to recover, wait for some of your cooldowns, as well as just finish chopping people up from the previous set. This will also allow you to drink your mana tea if you have accumulated high stacks. If you have a lot of range in your group, I would pay attention to their positioning. Conduit has a very short range of 25 yards, so if they're sitting out there waiting for their bird to drop them so that they can port, they are going to be out of your range and they might be low health, so just be aware of that. This fight's very rinse and repeat. There's not a lot of variety or variables. The only thing that really changes are the beam targets, and even then it's 3 of the 5 people in your group getting targeted each time, so there's going to be a lot of overlap regardless. Usually I will try to hold cooldowns on the set that has a tank target, just because that means I'm only needing to heal 2 people instead of 3, because the tank is not going to be taking as much damage as the rest of the group would. They're a bit more self-sustaining. And like many other mechanics, I usually try to prioritize myself last just because we have all of those self-heal amps on us. It makes it a lot easier to heal ourselves up last minute rather than someone else. For Windrunner Spire, you can just run the standard build. There is nothing special in here for either of these encounters. Emberdawn plays into another one of our weaknesses, which is heavy 2-target damage on a single mob to hit. So this is going to be a lot of casting, a lot of spot healing on the main phase damage, which is the tornado dropping, and then during the intermission is when you'll send cooldowns. Because Chi-Ji is so weak, it's likely that you'll actually have to do a lot of spot healing during your Chi-Ji intermission as well, just because it really doesn't do anything anymore. It's kind of just there to put out shields and enveloping mist, and then you're back to being basically cooldownless. So Chi-Ji will usually get paired with additional spot healing or revival, sometimes litany, but typically I will do litany and conduits together on this fight for the second intermission. I do like saving Life Cocoon for the intermission just to kind of pause someone's health bar, usually the evoker. It is tempting to want to use it during the tornadoes, but you shouldn't have to send any cooldowns for those. If they do take a tick of the fire stuff on the ground, they're probably just dead. I think that's a one-shot or close to it on anything above like a 16. On this fight, you do have to watch your tank a little bit. Usually just a renewing mist and enveloping mist is fine with some spot healing here and there, but the burning claw does quite a bit of damage. For this intermission, I am using conduit and then just spot healing it through Shaylun's and my ancient teachings. For this intermission, I have 2 charges of Rising Sun Kick with Thunder Focus Tea as well as my Chi-Ji. I also end up using Litany here just because Chi-Ji wasn't doing enough healing to heal through it by itself. And then just finishing off the phase with some spot healing. I do end up pressing Revival at the very end, but I really didn't need to. And again, this footage was taken before 12.0.5, so now you can use Soothing Mist while moving, which makes this fight a lot easier, especially as you are leaving with the flaming updrafts to get to the edge of the room. You can just be Soothing Misting and running, so that you never actually end up dropping that low. Very helpful for this fight. Here I ended up using Conduit early just to top Kovu before we actually went into the Burning Gale phase. If this were taken in 12.0.5, I would have just Soothing Misted him while I was running back in, but because I don't have that here, I was just using what I had. Unfortunately here too, I am stupid and I just walked right back into that last tornado, trying to get a Rising Sun kick. Don't do that. And finally, we have the last boss of Windrunner. I feel a little bad about this one, because this is by far the most asked about boss, and I feel like I have the least advice for it. This is one of those bosses that if the group isn't doing the mechanics or isn't doing things to make your life easier, it is just going to be difficult, and at a certain level, just not realistic for you to heal through the mechanics. Typically what goes wrong here is DPS do not clear their arrow debuff. You have two opportunities to clear it, one during the main phase and then one during the jumping phase, I guess you could call it, where you have to jump over the ring. Mistweaver can clear immediately both times and then just transcend over the ring. A lot of classes do have ways to get across this. Monk can transcend, warriors can port, I think DKs can just AMS and walk through it. So in a perfect world, everyone would be clearing their debuffs right now. There is a slight loss of damage due to the fact that you were in the air for a couple of seconds, but it does make your healer's life a lot easier. And then the gust shots are going to also do a significant amount of damage, so even if you're not going to be clearing your arrow debuff on the first set every time, you should do it at least before the gust shots. This is just because you'll have two dots on you ticking at the same time, straight into the Bold Gale, which is the frontal on the targeted player. I usually like to save Cocoon for that if I can. Most of the time you can, but just be aware that Life Cocoon will not last for the full duration, so you will have to spot heal them towards the end. Now that we can use Soothing Mist while moving, this isn't as important, but you do have to pay attention kind of to when you are going to be in the air. Make sure people are chopped before you jump up, because you're not going to have any uptime on the boss. Normally I would say Revival or Celestial Conduit for that kind of section of time, but now that we have Soothing Mist, it doesn't matter quite as much. I know a lot of people asking for the footage or for tutorials on these bosses are doing it in pugs or in groups that they're maybe not necessarily in comms with, so at this point it would be worth it to tell your group, hey, you need to clear your arrows. That'll make it a lot easier. I think around key level 16 to 18, around there, is when people would hopefully know the mechanics and understand what to do with this. And that's also about the point in which it's not realistic for people to just heal through it anymore. So never hurts to ask, never hurts to communicate with your team, because there is some roleplay before this boss, so you could type it out real quick, but ultimately it is your group doing mechanics that will make this much harder or much easier. If you think that I missed any boss or that there was something specific that you wanted me to go over and I didn't, feel free to let me know in the comments and I will do a part 2 if I have enough of them. If I don't have enough to do a whole second video, I will just do it as a short, so either way, let me know if there's one that you would like me to cover that I didn't. But otherwise, that is all I have today. I will see you guys in the next video, and thanks for watching.